All right, I want to give you a little rundown on this little guy. It's a 1,000-watt inverter generator that I picked up from Walmart.com. These are at a bunch of the different home centers, but honestly, I thought that this was a really neat little size. 20 pounds roughly. You fill it up with oil and some gas, it gets a little heavier. 800 watts running, 1,000 watts peak is what they're rating this at. And so today, got it out of the box, filled it up with oil, walked it through its break-in procedure. And I gotta be honest, I'm not real impressed with the overall performance. So it is quiet, it runs pretty smooth, but this little guy doesn't quite put out the wattage that it should. So I wanna show it to you running, show you what happens when we get into some of the higher wattage levels in the running, and show you how that might impact your purchase. Okay, so walk you through it a little bit here. Just one 120 volt outlet on the front of it, not unexpected. A 12 volt DC output that puts out about 4 amps. And then we've got an eco throttle, essentially just controls the RPM, lets it ramp downward when you're not loading it up, as well as an on-off switch, electronic on-off, so that it'll cut the power for the spark. On the side here, we've actually got a fuel on-off switch, which I really like. That's a nice feature on a generator for $149. Pull start here. The choke, and then we've actually got a primer bulb, which is also nice if you're putting this thing away, you're draining the carburetor. That's nice to be able to just inject that gas back in there so that you can get it started more easily. So let's go ahead and start it up. I want to get it warmed up for you, and then I'm going to put some different example loads that I've got back here on it to show you how quickly we can get it to overload when we're not even near what it's rated at that 800 watts. Not too terribly hard to start, especially right now. So it's got 4 hours on it as it is today. This is running with the choke now off. It has been running for a couple of hours before this. I let it cool down a little bit before we made this video. So we're going to let it warm back up and get back into running shape so that we can put the load on it and see how it performs. Alright, so we've given it just a couple of minutes here to get a little bit more heat back in and get it running smooth. You can see it does run very smoothly for a small engine. It's a 40cc engine, and in this little guy here, we've done 3 oil changes already. So in 4 hours, I did one at 1 hour, 2 hours, and ran it with a little bit of load, around 400 watts for the next 2 hours before giving it this oil change. So the oil in it now is fresh. We'll get some heat into it. I just want to give you an example of how quiet it is with no load. This is without the eco throttle turned on, so you can hear I'm talking over it to you guys on the camera. When we reach down to the front here and turn on the eco throttle, very simple. You can actually hear the engine ramp down in those RPMs. It gets much quieter. So that is a nice feature, again, on a generator at this price point. I really like that. One of the reasons that I considered buying this, considering all of the other types of generators that we already have in the garage here. We're going to let it keep running, then I'm going to put on the load. We're going to talk about that. Okay, a little more time elapsed here. I know I'm out of the camera. We're running now with the kilowatt hooked up, and this is just a nice little meter, especially at this level of load, to check what we're seeing out of this little guy. So we have 124 volts coming out right now. We're drawing just a few watts, and that is just the power that the kilowatt itself draws when you hook it up. So just 1 watt here. Very, very little power right now. You see the voltage is 124, and we're seeing about 59.9.8 hertz, which is very much expected. 60 hertz would be the normal output for this. So that looks pretty good. We're running on eco throttle right now. I want to turn that off and show you what it looks like there too. So again, hertz stays very steady. That's not unexpected, especially with an inverter generator. That's one of the big reasons you might be buying something like this. A bit of voltage. Voltage is looking pretty good here. Eco throttle's turned off now. We're still seeing 124 volts. There's a little padding built in there, of course, so that when it does see load, we don't see a massive sag, or at least that's what it should do. Wattage still, of course, the same. We haven't added any load. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the load, and before I do that, let's go back to eco throttle, make it a little quieter. I've got a couple of examples of load. This is a heat gun. This thing is actually about 500 watts on the low setting. It's 480 measured watts. This is actually probably going to be the biggest load we're going to handle with this today. We've got a 30 watt fluorescent work light, just a standard work light here. We've got a 60 watt incandescent bulb. And then in the very back there, I've actually got a 100 watt fan. It has 3 settings, so about 110 watts at the highest setting, all the way down to about 80 watts at the lowest setting. I want to show you what it does here when we start to load this up. And I would expect very much to be able to run both the 480 watt heat gun, the fan, and these 2 lights without too much trouble. That would keep us well under the 800 watts that this is rated for. And we'll see that measured on this right here, this kilowatt. So we're going to ramp it back up. Let's give it a fighting chance to take on this load. It's running at full blast now. Eco throttle has been turned off. It is warmed up. Everything is set to on. You can see our output here still looks good. And of course, voltage is reading 124. Let's start adding some load. So just the first load here, just 30 watts. We see that the voltage continues to stay around 124. We look at our wattage, 24 watts, which is not unexpected here. Want to add that fan now. All right, with the fan turned on, like I said, about 100 watts added to the overall load, a little bit over that 105 watts. We're at 137 watts now. Generator, not struggling at all. 130 watts, that is basically an eighth of what it should run in. We're going to give this a shot now. This is in the low setting, 480 watts that we're going to add to this. That would put us around 600 watts total for this load. Let's take a look at what happens when we add that 600 watt load. So at 600 watts here, you can see that the overload light immediately lights up and the generator dies. So in that order, if we add all of the other items, the fan, the light, and then the heat gun, this thing will not stay running. And that only equates to 640 watts. This is a resistive load, very simple load, not much to it. So we're not starting a big motor. There's no major peak or inrush current. This here is running very steady, no big current. This guy already had its peak when we started it. So the fan does peak a little bit higher than 100 watts when we start it. But again, adding something like this should not have gotten us over that 1,000 watt peak. And as we measured here, we were only around 630 watts. And this has already shown its overload light constantly lit, resulting in, of course, the engine cutting off. And that's exactly what it should do, but not that low. So that's a pretty disappointing result. Again, with the engine running, no eco throttle turned on. Let's go ahead and start it back up and give it another shot. So you do want to make sure you unplug any load before you give it a restart. We'll turn it to the side here. Give it a little bit of choke. It does like a little choke to get going. And then immediately cut that choke. We'll turn it back around. So again, eco throttle turned off. You heard it ramp up to full speed. Off. Generator in the on position. Output light again is green, so that's good. Let's go ahead and plug this back in. We're going to turn off our loads again here. That's an electronic switch, so it's already turned off. Let's plug it in. You can see we have power. And again, we're at 124 volts. So let's add this again in a slightly different order and see what we get. So I'm going to go back to the wattage here. We're at 1 watt. Let's turn on that heat gun. So you can see now, the heat gun is on. We're at a 500 watts continuous, and you can already see that our overload light on the front of the generator begins to flash. Now, the owner's manual suggests that if the light is flashing, generally speaking, that means that we're getting close to the maximum current, the maximum wattage that this generator can deliver, and that we should already begin backing it off. But as we can see, measured, we're only at 490 watts, so that's a little bit of a problem, considering the rating that we were expecting on this. Let's add a couple more things. So now we've added a 60 watt incandescent light bulb. Chose incandescent, of course, because it's a very predictable load. 60 watts, 60 watts. Very close when we measure that. Now we're running 546 watts total. Again, overload light still flashing here. It has not leveled off. We haven't found that the generator is catching up with this load by any measure, and so we're going to keep adding to it here and see if we can get it closer to the 800 watts it's rated for. So now we're at 580 watts. I just turned on the fluorescent work light. Again, overload light continues to flash. Oil alert's clear. Output is good so far. We're still no eco throttle. We're not going to add the heat gun. We know that would far exceed the capacity of this generator even at its peak. So that would put us around 1,080 watts. We know it can't handle it. But let's add the 100 watt fan to this equation and see what happens. Now we're at 650 watts. You can see the overload light is now lit continuously, and there we go. So really what I want to kind of share with you guys, I thought this was a really neat generator. I thought the size was cool. I thought it was very light. And realistically, if you were looking at the ratings, you'd think that this might make sense for a small camping loadout, a tailgating experience, but I just can't recommend it. Looking at this, it's delivering about 80% of what it is rated at. That is, again, 800 continuous running watts and 1,000 peak watts. My guesstimate, with the light factored in here, is this runs about 550 continuous watts, and your peak is probably around 650 or 700 watts before it's going to cut out on you. So I just wanted to give this a little review of this thing. I thought it was neat. I didn't think it was going to be a real high quality piece of equipment, but I did think it would meet at least the specs in a much more close capacity than it actually has. So take that into consideration if you're looking at one of these. Again, bought this off of Walmart.com, but they're everywhere. You can find them at Home Depot, Lowe's, all the other places, all the other big box stores. And we found this one on Slick Deals actually this week. So keep it in mind, buyer beware. I wouldn't recommend this thing. It's going to go back tomorrow.